Chapter 3, A Little Conversation. Wally woke up the next morning to cold. The air was cold, the pillow was cold, his nose, the only thing sticking out of the covers was cold, but the space under the blankets was toasty warm, and Wally did not want to get up ever again. With one finger, he pulled the covers down a little so he could peek out. The window was coated with frost. In fact, it made a pattern that looked like the continent of Africa, except that it had a rather large lump where a lump shouldn't be. Wally loved to study things. He could easily stay under the blanket the rest of the day. "Wally, I won't tell you again," came his mother's call. "Get up and get dressed. There's oatmeal on the stove if you want it." Wally closed his eyes, counted to 20, and then threw off the covers and, like a soldier going into battle, grabbed his clothes and headed for the warmth of the bathroom. Josh was already in there, however, taking a shower. "Ugh!" howled Wally. "For goodness sakes, he'll be out in a few minutes," said Mrs. Hatford. "For once in my life, I'd like to see 4 boys get themselves off in the morning without any uproar whatsoever." Mornings in the Hatford household were always hectic because Mr. Hatford was a mail carrier who had to be at work by 8:30. The boys had to be at school by 9, and Mrs. Hatford had to be at her job at the hardware store by 9:30. So the family showered in shifts, and the part of the morning that Mrs. Hatford liked best, she said, was when everyone else was gone and she could enjoy a cup of coffee in peace. "Well, maybe by now things will have settled down some at the post office," Mr. Hatford said. "Have a good day, Ellen," he said. "You too, guys." At last, the boys were bundled up, ready to go. Teeth were brushed, homework collected, lunches packed, and they set off out the door. "Let's get to school before we run into the girls," Jake said. "I don't feel like being nice to anyone this morning." "We have to be nice," said Peter. "Mom said." "Just come on," Jake grumbled. But no sooner had they got to the end of the driveway than they saw the 3 Malloy girls coming over the swinging bridge that crossed the Buckman River. The river came into town from one direction, circled around the end of Island Avenue, and flowed back out again. The girls were headed for school. "Hi," said Josh, trying his best to be friendly as he had promised. He and his twin brother were as different as salt and pepper, but they really got along well. Jake was usually the ringleader of the bunch, full of energy and ideas. Josh had ideas too, but he liked to draw almost more than he liked eating or sleeping. He could draw pictures of anything, but he especially liked drawing airplanes, aliens, race cars, and horses. "Hi," said Beth, smiling back. No one frowned at anybody, and Peter looked from one to another, happy that finally it seemed his brothers, whom he loved, and the Malloy girls, whom he liked very much, appeared as though they might possibly get along. When they had gone another half block and nobody had said anything particularly mean, Peter chirped, "Isn't it nice that we're all being friendly?" "Hush, Peter," muttered Jake. But Caroline said, "Well, I think January is going to be wonderful because guess what? Buckman is celebrating its 200th anniversary. The Buckman Community Players are putting on a play, and I'm going to be in it." "You? What are you going to be? The dog?" asked Wally. As soon as the words were out of his mouth, he realized this did not sound friendly or nice at all. So he quickly added, I mean, is this a play about people or animals?" He tried to make it sound polite. "People, of course. About the founding of the town of Buckman." "Whoop-de-doo. Now that ought to be a real sellout," said Jake. "They're looking for 2 boys. Why don't you come and try out for the parts?" Caroline asked. "I'd rather have my fingernails pulled out one by one," said Jake. Beth studied him. "That's funny. Eddie said she'd rather have her teeth pulled out than get up on stage." "I don't want my teeth or my fingernails pulled out," said Peter. The sky was gray, the air was cold, and the snow that was left on the ground was old and dirty. It seemed to Wally as though the new year could at least bring in some new snow. Why should they have to keep going in the same old school, in the same old town, in the same old snow that had been around for days? He didn't know how much about how Buckman got started, but he didn't think the 200th anniversary would be all that great a celebration. Wait till June when we have the Strawberry Festival. Now that's worth seeing. There's a strawberry parade, a strawberry float, strawberry ice cream, strawberry pie. Is there Strawberry Princess? Caroline wanted to know. If there is, I'm going to try out for it. "Ha," said Wally. And he would have said more, but he remembered he was supposed to be nice to the girls. It was just that Caroline really bugged him sometimes. Whenever there was a part to be played center stage, Caroline wanted to be there in the spotlight. The old brick building loomed up ahead, and he tried to prepare himself for Miss Applebaum, who always had a pile of work waiting. The girls went on ahead. Peter followed, then Josh, then Wally, then Wally turned around. Jake was a few feet behind him, packing a huge ball of dirty snow in his two gloved hands. And just as Eddie put her feet on the top step and reached out to open the door, Jake drew his arm back and took aim. Jake, Wally warned him. Treat them like sisters, remember? And he let the snowball fly. At that exact moment, Eddie opened the door and stepped back to let Peter go through. The snowball went flying right through the doorway and into the face of the principal. Chapter 4, Big Mistake. Caroline, Beth, and Eddie could only stare. The big fat snowball positively exploded in Mr. Kelly's face. Clumps of snow skittered down his shirt front, then onto his shoes. The principal leaned forward, removed his glasses and shook them, then pulled a handkerchief from his pants pocket and wiped his face. Out on the sidewalk, the Hatford boys froze like toy soldiers facing the enemy. When Mr. Kelly put his glasses on again, his eyes fell once on Eddie, who was still holding the door open. I'm sorry, said Eddie. I missed. Caroline gasped. You missed? The principal repeated. Yes, that snowball was thrown at me and I didn't catch it. Beth and Caroline looked at each other. Out on the sidewalk, the Hatford boys' mouths fell open one by one. First Jake's, then his brother's. Why was she covering for Jake? You know the rules about snowballs on the playground, Mr. Kelly thundered. Yes, sir, but we were only practicing for the baseball team. We weren't having a snowball fight. Caroline blinked. Mr. Kelly stepped to the door and looked out at the Hatford brothers and the other children who were waiting to come in. Then he looked again at Eddie. You were practicing for the baseball team? Yes, sir. And usually I'm very, very good. If I'd been the pitcher instead of the catcher, this wouldn't have happened. But Mr. Kelly still had a big red mark on his forehead. As much as Eddie wanted to make the team come April, Caroline could not believe she had taken the blame for a snowball meant for her. Who are you playing catch with, Mr. Kelly asked. I threw it, said Jake, stepping forward. You will not go down to the gym for morning recess. You will stay in your classroom and Eddie will write, I will not play catch with snowballs 100 times on the blackboard while Jake watches. Jake will wipe it off. Then you will both stay in your classroom for afternoon recess. Jake will write, I will not play catch with snowballs 100 times while Eddie watches. Then Eddie will wipe it off. And if I see you throwing snowballs again on the playground, you will both be banned from the team. Is that understood? Yes, said Jake. Yes, said Eddie. And Caroline didn't think she had ever seen Eddie look happier. Mr. Kelly went on down the hall. The Hatford boys scattered as soon as they got inside, but Caroline and Beth crowded around Eddie. Are you out of your mind? Why did you take half the blame for Jake? He wasn't being nice to us at all. You know he tried to hit you with that snowball. So much for his New Year's resolution. But Eddie's eyes were shining. Didn't you hear what the principal said? If I throw any more snowballs on school property, I'm banned from the team. That means if I don't throw any more snowballs, I'm not banned. I can try out. He practically said so. So that was it, Caroline realized. Eddie's mind was as quick as her pitching arm. Eddie grabbed her sister's arms. But I'm not through with Jake yet. Wait for me after school at that big oak tree just off the playground. We want to be waiting when the boys go by. Caroline had two wonderfully exciting things to think about all day: the tryouts for the Buckman players and what Eddie was going to do to Jake after school. Wally, however, who sat in front of Caroline and Miss Applebaum's class, seemed completely baffled by what Eddie had done. What got into Eddie? He asked. Caroline shrugged. I don't know. I guess she was just feeling, well, a little sisterly today. That's all. When the fourth graders went out for recess that morning, Caroline went by the sixth grade classroom, and then there was Eddie writing, I will not play catch with snowballs 100 times on the board, while Jake watched. When the fourth graders went out for recess that afternoon, Caroline went by the sixth grade classroom, and there was Jake writing, "I will not play catch with snowballs," with Eddie watching. Caroline had her books all ready at 3 o'clock. So as soon as the bell rang, she grabbed her jacket and was the first one out the door. She was halfway across the playground before anyone else even came out the building, and was soon joined by the oak tree by Beth and Eddie. "What's up?" asked Beth. "You mean what's down, or what's gonna be down? Jake's gonna be down, that's what. We're going to wait here, and when the Hatfords come by, we're going to leap on Jake, all three of us, before Wally and Josh can even think of stopping us. We're going to stuff Jake so full of snow, he'll think he's a snowman. Beth, you push snow down his collar. Caroline, you rub snow in his face, and I'm going to cram a snowball right into his mouth. As soon as you're done, run like crazy, and I'll meet you at home." When Eddie got even, she didn't fool around. Beth looked at her older sister uncertainly. "Isn't this just going to start the war all over again?" "All over again? It never stopped. If the war was over, how come Jake was trying to plaster me against the school door with a giant snowball?" "Yeah, but if we try to get even, then they'll try to get even, and it will just go on and on." "Trust me," said Eddie. So the girls hid behind the hedge, backpacks firmly secured so they could make a quick getaway. When other kids passed, they pretended they were just standing there having a casual conversation. But when they heard the Haffer boys coming down the sidewalk, they flattened themselves against the bushes and prepared to jump. "I told you they were nice," Peter said. "I can't understand it," came Josh's voice. "If Eddie hadn't taken part of the blame, Jake, you would have been toast." "I don't know," Wally's voice. "I had a feeling they're up to something. Eddie wouldn't do something like that without—" The boys passed the hedge and the girls leaped. Eddie tackled Jake's legs. Beth sat on him. Caroline grabbed a handful of snow and rubbed it in his face. It was hard to tell what was happening because the boys were yelling, feet were kicking, arms were flying. And the next thing Caroline knew, Beth and Eddie were running in two different directions. Caroline herself headed for the backyard of the nearest house as fast as her legs would carry her. Around a tree, under a clothesline, through a gate, over a fence, but the boys were still gaining. Why were they all after her? It had been Eddie's idea after all. Yet here came the Hatfords, howling like hyenas. And before she knew it, she was in the Hatfords' own backyard, backed into a corner next to the house. Hello? Hey.
Where you
At school?